In today's video, I'm going to cover the most expensive downtown Toronto condo buildings based upon an average price per square foot sold in the last 6 to 8 months. We're going to cover what these buildings have in common, what the buildings exactly are, how much are they selling for, and so much more. So before we get into it though, hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate. If you find this content enjoyable, informative, subscribe, comment, give it a like. Furthermore, feel free to get in touch with me. My contact info in the description box and the link to book a call with me available there as well. Enough of that. Let's get on with the video and let's get on with the chart. The chart in question here is one I created based upon data found from MLS, Realtor.ca, and Condos.ca. And it lists all the buildings based upon an average price per square foot in the last 6 to 8 months. In total, we're talking about 15 buildings. And before we cover the common trends, the common denominators, let's quickly go through the list. The cheapest entry on the list is obviously Minto Yorkville Park at $1,412 per square foot. You have the Gloucester on Yonge and One St. Thomas residence at around roughly the same price point at $1,400 per square foot. Really the differences of a couple of dollars. And once again, keep in mind, sales are low and sales are especially low for luxury buildings and luxury units, right? Right now, the appetite for $2-3 million properties, condo units, even 1.5 to $1.8 million condo units is not that high. Nonetheless, though, despite the low sales, I thought this would be interesting. Obviously, higher on the food chain, you have Cumberland Tower condos at $1,450 or so dollars per square foot, and you really hit the $1,500 price per square foot mark at the top 5. Starting with 18 Yorkville, for example. And then at 1 Bedford, you jump into $1,650 or so dollars per square foot. The third most expensive is 77 Charles Street West at around $1,700 per square foot. And there's only 2 condo buildings in downtown Toronto and really Toronto overall, GTA overall, that I'm aware of that have an average price per square foot of $1,900, being obviously the Four Seasons residence and 88 and 100 Yorkville. So that's a brief glance at the list. So what are some common themes, some common trends? First and foremost, these buildings all belong to traditionally, classically thought of as prestigious neighborhoods. Obviously, Yorkville. Majority of this list is on Yorkville. Yorkville is the most expensive area, Toronto-wide for condos and really for most properties, right? Yorkville is really expensive. And with Yorkville, you get the landmarks, you get the high-end fine dining, high-end fine shopping. I don't have to put across to most Torontonians why Yorkville is thought of as expensive. I mean, it's another question to think whether it's overrated or not. That's a separate discussion. But for most people, we understand the allure of Yorkville, even though if we might not agree with it, we understand it. And then some other buildings on this list belong to Bay Street Corridor, for example. Obviously, still close to fine dining and luxury shopping, but also quite close to the financial district. I mean, truly not even close, being inside of the financial district in downtown. And on top of Yorkville, on top of Bay Street, you have University Avenue area, which some people call the annex, some people call really a further extension of Yorkville, whatever you want to call it, the University Bloor area, right? Where there's more cultural and historical significance. It's compared to Yorkville, less, commerce oriented, less consumerism, but more residential, quote unquote, and more heritage. So essentially, these condos are clustered around Yorkville, Bay Street, and University. Well, and really another interesting trend here, getting past the locations, is the ages. Now, there are a couple of older entries on this list. For example, the Prince Arthur at 38th Avenue by Minto is around the early 2000s, late 90s, making it the oldest entry on this list. Same with the Regency on Yorkville around the early 2000s. But really most of these buildings were built in the 2010s, starting with 1 Bedford, Four Seasons in 2012, Condominiums around 2014, Exhibit Residences in 2017, at Yorkville Park around 2018, obviously Gloucester on Yonge, the newest addition on this list, in the early 2020s, I believe 2021 or 22, that project was finished up. I think 22 actually, later in 22. So basically there aren't many before the 2010s. Don't get me wrong, there are expensive buildings still out there that were built in the 90s, but not in this echelon. We're talking about buildings that were built in the 90s that might still be selling around, you know, $1,100 or $1,200 per square foot. But this is the highest of echelons, and most buildings of that age are not selling at those price points. And this leads me to another thing I want to discuss, is the average price per square foot can be misleading. Not to say these are not expensive, hefty buildings. They are. But for example, there are some other buildings that are not in downtown. For instance, I'm thinking of buildings in Bayview Village area, that entry-level units in those buildings are starting at 1.2, 1.3. So there aren't any units cheaper than 1.2, 1.3, right? There are buildings like that in Bayview Village, very high-end prestigious buildings. There aren't any units cheaper than 1.2, 1.3, but on a per square foot price basis, because the units are quite large and it's not downtown. It's a really good area, it's Bayview Village, but it's not downtown. If you take a look at that building on an average price square foot basis, you might think it's cheaper than it actually is. Whereas in reality, it's not cheap whatsoever. You know, the units start once again in that building at 1.2, 1.3. And one last thing I want to bring to your attention is that 3 of these buildings out of the 12 are mixed use hotel / private residence condominiums. The second most expensive one, the Four Seasons, and the one we just discussed in terms of being the oldest on this series, or on this list rather, Prince Arthur. These ones are mixed, right? They have their private residences, but they have their hotel portions as well. But the Prince Arthur was one of the first of its kind in Toronto, being a mixed development, and of course the Four Seasons as well, being probably the flagship, best example of a mixed development, being private residences and hotel at the same time. Anyways, that is it for today's video. Anyways, I thought that was quite interesting to cover the top 15 most expensive Toronto condo buildings in downtown Toronto based upon an average price per square foot basis. If you found this video informative, and if you want to hear more on the Toronto condo market and condo reviews, different buildings, different opinions, analysis, buyer advice, seller advice, and so much more, subscribe, comment, and like for more. Lastly, you can get in touch with me. My contact information in the description box. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.